I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Luc Tremblay, with Transport Canada. He's the Executive Director for Domestic Vessel Regulatory Oversight at Transport Canada Marine Safety. His role and responsibility is for inspection, certification, and enforcement of regulations on all Canadian vessels. He is also responsible for development of regulations related to design, construction, and safety equipment of vessels and safety management systems. Prior to joining Transport Canada in 2017, Mr. Tremblay has occupied various positions in the private sector as a marine consultant, lead designer in a major shipyard. And Luc holds a diploma in naval architecture from the Institute of Maritime in Quebec and a degree of engineering and technology from Memorial University in Newfoundland and Labrador. Welcome, Luc, and we're looking forward to seeing your presentation.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you all. I think there's a typo in my bio. It said 2017 with transport, but it's 2007. But it's a typo.
Okay.
I don't think it's you. So
Yeah.
it's been a bit more than 5 years. It's been 15 years. Yeah. So thanks. So thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. And I think it's I'm happy that you have an interest in what we're trying to do with safety management. I'll apologize in advance if any of you were at the Vancouver CMAC that was this week, actually, because I know we are virtually in Vancouver today, but because it's more or less the same presentation, but I count on you to have new questions, so that will make it a bit different as we go. So with that, the presentation is about our proposed marine safety management system regulation. So I'm going to start with the overview of the presentation. We'll discuss quickly on 6 elements. First, why we're doing so. You have the government favorite, the acronym at the beginning, Marine Safety Management System Regulation, MSMSR. Why we're doing that? What's the timeline to do the regulation? What will be the class, because the regulation will divide vessel and class, and the requirement is vary per class. The concept of the ship manager, which exists in the for those that are familiar with SMS, the concept exists with the company, but we have adapted that for the Canadian context. The compliance requirement and the transition period, so the time when the regulation will be enforced and how long it will take so for a vessel to have to be compliant to that regulation. So the purpose of the regulation is basically it's to implement safety management across the Canadian fleet with little exception. This is coming from a number of recommendations from our Transportation Safety Board. Safety management is also in the Transportation Safety Board watch list for marine and also for other mode, but we're talking marine here. So we made the first proposal a number of years ago where we were limiting the scope, but we have reviewed the proposal 4 or 5 years ago, and now we have extended the scope to, as I said, the majority of the fleet. And here we're talking about the cryptic class 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'll explain that later. The other interesting point is that the regulation will also apply to foreign vessels operating in Canadian waters. Not that they will have to be certificated by transport, but that they will have to have a safety management system equivalent on board of some sort. And it's not an issue for large vessels that are already certified under SOLAS for the safety management system, but it's a bit different when we're talking about smaller vessels that don't necessarily have domestic requirement for that at this point. So here it's the exclusion. I said it applies to most of the fleet. It will apply to most of the fleet. So that's the exclusion, the vessel that will not require a safety management system. The first group is the small fishing vessel, up to 20.4 meters, strange number, but that's the old 80 feet. We still have that in our regulation up to now, or up to 150 gross tonnage. So this will not apply to this group of vessel. Reasoning behind that is that we had already put a new regulation in 2017 for these, which requires safety procedure to deal with emergency and to operate safely, and drills and records. So it's a light form of SMS. So because it's recent, it's 5-year-old, we have decided not to include them in this project. The other group, the second one, will be the non-propelled vessel, so the barge and the common language that do not carry person, dangerous chemical, or oil in bulk. So basically the dry cargo barge. The third one is vessel used for whitewater rafting. So it's a limited scope, local in some area. Human power vessel, pleasure craft, and also foreign government vessel used exclusively on government non-commercial. Yeah, Solus Chapter 9 actually. So that we're carrying over. So other than that, it's the whole fleet. So probably 15,000 vessel overall. I don't have the number, and maybe they're later in the presentation. But so the timeline for the regulation, the Canada Gazette 1, which is the first step to put the regulation in force, is planned for June 2022, and we're still according to schedule as we speak. So we have we don't control everything. You know that to make regulation, it must go through Treasury Board, sometime Cabinet, and with all the events that are happening right now, the schedule is sometime affected. But we're still confident that we'll be able to make it into Canada Gazette in June. So when it's in Canada Gazette, we've been consulting for years through the CMAC and our online site and other ad hoc meeting. But the Gazette 1 is the formal consultation process for regulation. The consultation period is, I believe, will be 75 days. It's minimum 60 days, but I think it's going to be 75 days because of the international component of that. There's a requirement that it is longer at that time. So which means a bit more than 2 months where you can send formal comment. By the way, there is an interesting thing for comment. There's a new website that the government have put in place. There was no process in the past sending an email to an address. Now there's a website where comment can be put and comment can be made public. So all the information will be available when the reg is published. So it's in development. I know we did some small amendment. We use a website. We hope that this will work for that regulation. It will be fully in place for this. And after the Gazette 1 in June, so if we talk about 6-day comment period, 2 months, a bit more, suppose we're at the end of June, so there'll be July and August to comment, send formal comment, and then the fall will be the period where we will take into consideration the comment, adjust the regulation if needed, and then after that, at the end of the year, we'll restart the second publication process to get the Gazette, with the goal of having it published on April 2023. So a bit more than a year from now. At that time, the regulation will be in force, but we will talk later about the timing. So it's not the vessel will not have to be compliant the day the regulation is there. There's a phase-in period after that we will see after. Okay, now I'm back to the class of Canadian vessel I mentioned on the first slide. There's 5 classes. So the first class is the vessel that are compliant with Solus Chapter 9. That have to be these vessels. They already have SMS. There's already regulation. They already have it. So for them, it's no change. They just have to continue to carry. We have about 100 of these vessels in Canada. So the ones that are trading internationally. The second group is a class 2, is the passenger vessel carrying more than 50% and that are more than 24 meters in length. And also the non-passenger of more than 500 gross tonnage. So here we're talking about local cargo ship or some maybe large fishing vessel. We have a few above 500, because I said fishing vessel are excluded, but only the smaller one, not the big one after about 24. So this will be in class 2. Then we'll have the class 3, which are all the remaining vessels of more than 24 meters in length that are not in class 1 and 2. So then if you look at that, you're probably aware of our Canadian delegation program. We have mandatory delegation for vessel above 24. So basically class 1, 2, and 3 is the delegated fleet. There are some vessels that have exemption, but in that group 1, 2, 3, and 4, there's about 700 vessels that are delegated and that are spread among these 3 classes. Okay, and there's maybe 50 vessels, I don't know the exact number, above 24 that have an exemption from delegation. These ones are inspected by TC. Then we have the class 4, there's two group of vessels on class 4. We subdivided in class A and B. The difference between the two group. The 4A, these are the vessels that are already inspected and certificated. So these are the vessels of more than 15 gross tonnage and up to 24 meter, because 24 meters in class 3. And also the passenger vessel of more less than 15 gross tonnage, but that carry more than 12. So we have a few dozen across the country. So very often small open boat, like those on the east know the boat that goes into the Daniel River and these things like that. So they're below 15 because they're open, but they carry like 40%. So these will be in the 4B, 4A, sorry. The 4B, these are vessels that are not inspected through the mandatory inspection process. They may be risk-based inspected, but they're not inspected. So they don't have an inspection every year or every 4 years. They can be risk-based inspection to our small vessel risk-based inspection program. So, and this is the subset of that group. It's the passenger carrying vessel one, the one that carry passenger, and also the tugs, the towboat. Up to they are in this group, the 4B. And then we have all the remaining of the fleet to which regulation apply. So other vessel up to 15, these are mostly workboat, up to 15 gross tonnage. These are also vessels that are not inspected and certificated. The other difference that I'm not sure is in the slide that you can see between these five class 1, 2, 3, and 4, as I said, are already inspected and certificated, with the exception of the 4B. So, so all these vessels will need to have their SMS also certified. Okay, so the delegated vessel, it will be certified by the recognized organization. The non-delegated vessel, it will be certified by transport. Initially, that's what we'll look. We may look at other option with time, but as of today, it's a principle. So, but the inspection and certification requirement will vary between class 1 and 4, and this is something that is not in the regulation because of the way the Canada Shipping Act is designed. What we have to put in the regulation is who needs to be certificated or not. The process to certify will be published in parallel, but it's not going to be in the regulation. So that gives more flexibility to adjust also depending on experience. And the class 5 will not be certificated. They will require to have an SMS on board, but there will be they won't have to contact TC to get the certificate. So again, the verification will be done through risk-based inspection. So this is a graphic view of these elements. I don't want to spend much time on that. It's just showing in a more graphical view what I explained in the table before. And before I go back a bit, before I go to sorry, the slide 6, I think. So I don't recall what's the title. So just to tell you again, that's a scale down from 1 to 5. So as I mentioned, that 1 is the one that already have an SMS under SOLAS. So that's the full SOLAS chapter 9 and an ISM code certification with everything that it implies, like the internal, the external audits, the designated person ashore, etc. When you move down to the class, the requirements are adjusted in the regulation, so that the requirements are less and less stringent or onerous, maybe, when you go down the class. So like a class 2 is quite similar to class 1. The difference is that class 2 make the application of, for those of you that are familiar with the ISM code, make the part A of the code mandatory, but not the part 2. And the part 2 is the part that govern the process of auditing and etc. So we didn't make that part, or part B, A, and B of the code, I think. I didn't make that part mandatory because we wanted to have more flexibility to adapt to the group of the vessel. There will be a process, but it's not going to be a carbon copy of the ISM code. It's going to be a simplified process. Same for class 3. The other difference also is that when you move down the scale of vessel, you no longer need to have the IMO requirement of a designated person ashore, which is in some case on larger vessel nearly a full-time job. When you go down, you need to have a person responsible, but that person could be doing something else because it's not a full time, but there needs to be somebody named, and that's what we're going to go when we advance in that. So going back, as I said, I was going to skip the slide. Here we have the ship manager. It's a concept that we are introducing in that regulation. It's a mimic of the company that you can see in the ISM code or IMO chapter 9. The reason we have to introduce that is because of the way our act is done and who is the authorized representative. The authorized representative in our act must be one of the owner. And it's sometimes that owner actually, for example, we have vessels that are owned by a bank. They're under lease. So I don't think that the Royal Bank of Canada can be responsible for the safety management system of the vessels that they own and that they lease. So that's why we're introducing that concept, so that somebody must be named, which should usually be the actual operator in the vessel instead of being the owner. So that's a concept that we are introducing for the regulation to be certain that we have a contact organization person that is responsible for the SMS. Okay, when I went back, I was a bit ahead of the presentation. What I was trying to explain is what we see below the requirement. Okay, so as I said, class 1 is full compliance with the ISM code, and that's already in place. These vessels already comply. Class 2 is also compliance with the code, but the part A of the code, not the part B that gives the detail of the oversight, audit process, etc. Class 3 is also compliance with part A of the code, but it's excluding section 4 and 12. One of these sections, I think it's 4, is the designated person ashore. So we're excluding that so that there's no need to have a person nominated to do the in the same manner as in the ISM code, the SMS ashore, because we're talking about smaller entity here often. And we're also removing the section 12, which is the audit process, because we will adopt a process that is more adapted to the smaller entity. And for class 4 and 5, the requirements are directly in the regulation. There is about 6 points that must be included, 6 high-level point that must be included into the SMS. The typical element that you will see also in the ISM code, but more elaborated. But there's the typical one about you need to have a company policy for safety. You need to have procedure in place to be certain that you're meeting the requirement of the regulation. You need to have procedure in place for maintenance to deal with emergency. So these are the 6 high-level points that are coded directly in the regulation. And below these 6, some of these points are expanded by sub-point to include what is needed. But it is a high level in the regulation for that. That's the element about foreign vessel. When we say that foreign vessel will need one, that's also for having a level playing ground. So foreign vessel, when they are in Canadian water, must have operate in accordance with the safety management system. We're not going to certify that. The regulation will ask that it's at least equivalent to what we have in Canada, but it doesn't have to be a carbon copy. For example, if we take tugs, if US tugs come in Canada, the US have developed their towing safety management system. So we will consider that as equivalent when these vessels are in Canada, if it's implemented and followed. There are other elements like right now in the US, for example, there's no mandatory SMS for smaller passenger vessel, but organizations like the PVA in the US have developed a safety management system, an internal one that they're actually proposing to the US Coast Guard as becoming more mandatory. So a system like that will be considered as equivalent if it's properly implemented. So that's what we mean by that requirement. Now the transfer period, as I mentioned, so there's a schedule. We'll see that after that. This will apply to the vessel that are already registered when the regulation come into force. If a vessel is registered after, they will have to have the SMS at the time of registration or first certification. could be the first certification, because it's really the operation time that is important, not the registration, because it could be registered a number of months before it actually operate. So, but there's no, the point is that there's no transition period for these one. They must have the SMS when they operate. All the other one, there will be a schedule according to the class type and size. The exception is the class one. As I said, they already have it, and they will have to continue to have the SMS. So I think there's a few graph at the after that that will I'll explain that, but depending on the type of vessel, it starts on the day the regulation is coming to force. All vessel except the one that already have required to have an SMS have a 1 year to develop and implement the system. So that's the basic that everybody have that. And after that, it's tied with the certificate renewal date of the vessel. For the vessel that are certificated, and for the vessel that are not, it's tied with the registry of the vessel, the time that the registry expire of the vessel. Registry is expiring over a schedule of 5 years. So we don't use the years, we use the month that so even if the registry is expiring in 3 years, but if it's in March, it's going to be the March of the given year, year 1 or year 2 or year 3 of the reg. It's not going to be the month of March when it's expired 3 years later. So okay, again, class 1, I said no transition because they already have it under the current reg. And then we have the for the different class, the more details. So class 2, 3, 4A is no later than the second anniversary of the coming into force of the reg, which means that, as I said, everybody has 1 year. And then from after that 1 year, during that year, the date that the certificate of that vessel expires is the date that they need the SMS. So some vessel will have to be compliant in the first month after the first year. Other will have another 11 months or close to 12. For the class 4B, that's the one that have no certificate. So it will be based on the month of the certificate registry expiry. And if the vessel is more than 7 meters, we divided the fleet approximately in two for these vessels. That's why it's a strange length of 7 meters over there. So it's when we say no later than second anniversary of the CIF. So suppose that the regulation, I'll make it simple, is coming into force the 31 of December 22. That's not going to be the case, it's going to be later, but suppose it's that. So then until the 31 of December 2023, there's no, that's the year to develop and adapt. And then after that, a vessel that has an of more than 7 meters for which the certificate of registry expire in February, whatever the year in February, will have to comply in February of that second year, if it's more than 7 meters. If it's less than 7 meters and it's also in February, it's going to be February of the other year after that. And then for the class 5, it's they have up to 3 years to comply to the regulation. So that's the workboat below 15 gross tonnage, basically. Question. That's where we are. So hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Luc. So just to, I have a few questions, but first off, some of our surveyors that may be attending today may not be overly familiar with the class 1, class 2 SMS systems that are already in effect. And for the class 4 and 5 that would affect under 15 gross tons or 7 meters, where could they get information for that to start doing some research into the SMS systems?
So I'm going to show you basically I mentioned the requirement for class 4 and 5 vessel are in this is a consultation version of the reg that I think was presented at the last CMAC in the national in November that I'm showing you here. It's not necessarily the final that will be there in a few months, but the reg, as I said, set the basic requirement. If you look here, that's what the A to F. That's expression you're familiar with, and I'm sure that's type of information procedure you're familiar with. what it has to be done now, that they have to be implemented into a structured system.
Yep.
So I think looking at what is there and looking at other SMS, sample SMS, how it's implemented is probably the better source. We will publish guideline also, but I suggest that you don't wait for that. There's plenty of resource on the web, and that gives you really the draft. I can share it with after the meeting. If you don't have it, the draft reg really put out the basic principle. And there's a number of examples outside of TC that exist. We will do our own, but they will be very similar to what you can find. And I think you have you can play a very important role in that, helping ship owner with your experience developing this system. And it's time. There's time to develop that. But I think you can have a role important to play in doing that.
Yeah. So just for some clarification, so I'm just going back to more small craft, light commercial surveyors, whether it's West Coast, East Coast, looking at fishing vessels or any sort of work boats. So it will be up to under 15 gross tons or 7 meters. It'll be up to the manager of the boat to create their own SMS 1 year following the effective date.
But they will have up to 3 years if it's under,
Okay.
15 gross ton, and they're not passenger and not tug.
That's correct. Yeah.
If they're passenger or tug, they will have between and above 7 meters, they will have 2 years at the maximum. First one will need to have it 1 year after, the last one 2 years after. If they're below 7 meters, but there's not much, maybe a few small sport fishing charter below 7 meters, but on the lake or something like that, probably not much on the coast. And the other one are very small. These one will have 1 more year. So yes, it will be for them to develop it. It will not be a certified system, but it's a system that could be verified on the risk base. And it is a place where there's a lot of room to support them. And then there's also tools that exist. For example, if you take the point B here, okay, instruction and procedure to ensure compliance with provision of the Act and its regulation respective to the safe operation of the vessel and protection of the environment. That's basically that the vessel, they have to have in place a system to check and remain compliant all the time. We already have tools, for example, for these vessels. Many of you may know our small vessel compliance program. Okay, so that could be a very good start for an operator to develop a policy and a procedure to say, I will register in that, I will look at the requirement. But also in the context of an SMS, as you know, it's not a one-off thing. It's not only I'm going to fill the form and get my decal and I forget about it. It's under the SMS, it has to be a continuous exercise that you remember. That's why you can take that system and leverage it and to include it into daily operation. But it's a very good starting point for that aspect. The other one, if you look at C, for example, level of authority, obviously some company is quite simple. This is a 1 or 2% operation. So it's only to confirm who's responsible for what. So for smaller vessel, there's some of these elements that will not be. For the other one, procedure for reporting shipping casualty in situation of compliance. These are requirements. They're requirements from the TSB, etc. It's just to be certain that it is documented and followed. So, and then the emergency situation is procedure for the drill and everything what they do if they so
yes,
again, it's a basic safety procedure, but in a structured system. And the structured system means you not only that you have a procedure in the drawer, is that you have a procedure that you practice, that you verify, and you record that you've done so. And it's possible to verify after the fact if an inspector goes that, yes, that's my safety, and I did there's no prescription in the reg, but if the person say, I did man overboard 3 times last year, that's my schedule, I do it every 4 months. It shows that they have done something and they're implementing it. Others may choose to do it every month, depending on the type of operation, because this is not prescribed to that level of detail, but it's expected that there's something and that there's trace that something is actually implemented.
Right. Okay, that's great information, and it's a lot of information. But from a small craft surveyor, it's a good opportunity now to become familiar with the SMS and how it applies to their field of operation or field of surveying. And
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, great information, Luke.
Just to add on that, Ed, for these small craft, the other thing we already have some discussion, but that we expect. Unfortunately, you know the small craft for many are organized into association, many are not. So at least when there's association, the association could be a great support to develop a model.
Yes.
But it has to be tailored to the operation, obviously. You cannot take the model and just change the ship and the option number on top of it. So that's my SMS. You need to adapt it. So I think that you could be a good contributor working with the association when there is, and then and after that, working with the owner when they adopt that model, or if they need to have their own, that's their choice. But there's place for that type of support.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So when does it go to Gazette?
Gazette 1 this June this year, and Gazette 2 planned for the spring of 2023.
Okay, so there's
about 1 year from now.
Yeah. But okay, that's great stuff. Yeah. I think it's important. It's going to be something I think we'll keep on top of and really highlight to our surveyors, our members, and get the message out, because I think it's important. And the interesting thing, and I don't know how it will be policed, is linking it to the registration, the smaller boats. This is my last question: is if they don't submit a plan, which I think is volunteer, like for 15 gross tons and under, they will not get a registration. Is that how I understand it?
No, because but most of the existing vessels are already registered. Some may not be. We know we're not blind. We know that some are escaping the system, but we're looking at them. But it's not linked to the registration. Actually, the registration is supposed to happen before. Okay. But the one that are certificated, the one that are inspected and certified, if they don't have the system, they won't get the certificate, because this is the thing that is renewed every year. It's every year for a passenger vessel. It's every 4 years for workboats that are less than 150 or about 24-meter length.
Right.
So this would be a condition for the renewal of the certificate when past the due date.
Hey, Luc, this is Bob Peter here. I know you touched on it earlier, but I just happened to have a phone call, or I received a phone call on Thursday, in regard to this type of information. Will your link here to your document in progress and your presentation, will they be available to us after?
Yes, I can send that too, so that you get a copy, no problem.
Yeah.
Also,
Bob, this whole speaker series is will be available on the IMS website as well. So and we'll provide some follow up to the speakers as well. Yeah.
Oh, terrific! Thank you, guys.
Ed, we have another question here.
Yeah,
yes.
Far away.
Yeah, you're talking length. Are you talking registered length or length overall?
For small vessel, it's length overall. But today, for small vessel below 15 gross tonnage, they're supposed to be the same. And again, it's length overall, but it's defined as length of the hull overall. It's not length with the bowsprit and something. It's really the hull. Yes. But they're supposed to be more or less the same today. While above 24-meter, then you have the registered length, which is from the bow, the water line to the rudder stock. Below that, below 15 gross tonnage, it's really the length overall, excluding appendage that are not part of the hull.
Okay, very good, Luc. Is there any other questions?
I have a quick question, Ed. Look, with the development of an SMS for a small vessel, is there sort of anything in the guidelines about the content of the SMS or what's required for a smaller vessel? Because I've done some of the big ones, and I know there's a lot of stuff that has to be thrown in on various things, but are you sort of working around the basics of the small vessel compliance program? What's on that list is sort of what should be included in an SMS?
But the small vessel compliance program is the regulation aspect. So it's really point B on the screen here. Plus, plus it touch also on the safety procedure because that's a requirement of the Act. But there's no detail except saying that you need that. We're working on guidelines, so there will be guideline published. We already have a very small set of guidelines on our website that has been there for years ago for small vessel SMS. But it was made before the regulation, so it's not necessarily structured like that. We're going to update that and have it available. But these will be in guideline, not in the reg. The regulation, the level that you'll see is what you see right now on the screen. Plus some, for example, you see here the 6 point. And then if you go down here, the point B is expanded into 4 more. Okay, and the point E is expanded into 4 more also. So that's very high level, but that's a requirement. We will expand that into more guideline that we'll publish. We're working on that, and they should be available this summer.
Okay.
First one. They will probably morph as we move with the final reg, but we hope to have a first version available soon. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Any other questions? All right. Thanks again, Luc. Lots of good, valuable information. I'm quite familiar with the SMS, but I think moving forward and how it evolves and becomes introduced to the industry, I think it'll be something that we'll probably really highlight with our members, surveyors through enhancing seminars to hone in on specific questions, because I know myself right from the very beginning of SMS years ago, we built voluminous libraries of SMS activity, which were hard to get through an audit on. So I think the SMS systems where they're really focused on specific tasks, you're doing what you say you do, essentially. So
anyway, if you organize other events, we'll be happy to support you, and I'll probably send people that know that event better than me, the one that are actually working on the reg. So Duguay is the manager that is on the reg, and he has also staff that have been working with SMS for a long time. Yeah. If you need that, and I'm sure also that listening to what Mike says at the beginning, I'm sure that IIMS in the training module that they have, you also have something that is quite good about SMS. So there's a lot of good source everywhere. But if you need to here in Canada any help, we will be available for that.
Very good. I'm sure Mike and Scott and myself will be probably in contact with you as it evolves and moves forward. So again, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Just Ed, before we let Luc go, it's Mike here. I might just ask you if you have a view on sort of mini ISM. I know certainly in the super yacht sector, they were tending to use what they called mini ISM, which is a kind of a scaled down version. Do you have a view on that, Luc?
But for our class 4 and 5 vessel, that's basically what we are asking for. We don't call it mini ISM, but it's class 1, it's full ISM.
Yeah.
Class 2, it's full ISM minus very little, and class 3 a bit less. And then at 4 and 5, we're getting into the mini ISM territory.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yes, we have a lot of information on that we could share with you, Ed, and other people in Canada.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I pause? Shall I hit the record stop? Yeah, I'm going to stop the recording.